Why does today's music, especially electronic music, often sound off to people who grew up in the 80s, like me? It's not just nostalgia, it has to do with how our brains develop. Research shows that musical taste forms most strongly between ages 12 and 22, overlapping with what's called the reminiscence bump, a period when we create especially vivid autobiographical memories. For 80s kids, that meant growing up with warm analog synths, catchy melodies, and big reverb-heavy drums. Today, many producers favor digital precision and clean sounds, which can feel unfamiliar if your ears were shaped by vintage gear. To understand why this contrast feels so stark, we look at how teenage brains process music, what made 80s synths special, and how discovering music back then was a completely different experience. When you hear a song you loved at 15, something unique happens in your brain. For those of us who grew up in the 80s, those tracks didn't just play in the background, they shaped how we experienced life. Studies show that between ages 12 and 22, our brains are especially sensitive to music. This is a period of intense neuroplasticity, when auditory regions are still developing and the music we hear gets deeply wired into memory pathways. fMRI scans have shown that music from adolescence triggers a stronger activity in the brain's reward centers, especially areas linked to pleasure and memory. So, for an 18's teen, hearing the opening synth of Take On Me or a huge gated drum fill can cause a literal dopamine rush, a physical reaction that doesn't happen as strongly with unfamiliar modern tracks. This goes beyond hearing a melody. Songs from those years often get tied to intense emotions and important moments. The brain's reward system is more active during adolescence, releasing more dopamine when we hear music we love. That's why an 80s track can instantly bring back a first crush, a school dance, or the thrill of growing up. The music becomes part of who you are. These memories last because we were formed during a uniquely sensitive window. As adults, when we hear new music, we subconsciously compare it to those early patterns, and if it doesn't match the warmth of analog synths or the clarity of 80s melodies, it can feel less satisfying. It's not that new music is worse, it just doesn't match the blueprint set during our formative years. So, when a familiar synth tone or reverb-drenched drum hits, it's not just nostalgia, it's a direct link to how our brains were wired. That's why 80s sounds can still feel like home. A big reason 1980s synth sounds still resonate is the way the instruments behaved. Analog synths like the Roland Juno 60, for example, used imperfect circuits and components. Oscillators would drift slightly in pitch, filters might respond a bit differently each time, and these small flows gave each note a unique character. Our brains pick up on those subtleties, registering them as alive and human. The warmth people associate with 80s music often comes from these imperfections. Drums had a unique flavor too, thanks to gated reverb, an effect discovered accidentally when engineer Hugh Padgham and producer Still Lillywhite recorded Peter Gabriel. A talkback mic picked up the drums, and after compression and gating, it created a huge punchy sound. With the AMS RMX16 reverb, it was perfected and made famous by Phil Collins in the Air Tonight. These textures shaped how the music felt. Bright synths matched the era bold visuals, and analog unpredictability mirrored teen energy. Listening now, these sounds don't just recall melodies, they evoke a time and place, like a snapshot of youth. But the gear was only part of the experience. The way we found and shared music in the 80s made those sounds even more personal. Accessing music in the 80s took effort. You might tune the radio at dawn to catch a favorite song, finger poised on the record button, hoping the DJ stayed quiet. Recording the whole track meant more than having it. It meant remembering the chase. Buying an album required saving up, visiting the store, and maybe agonizing over the decision. Reading liner notes and studying cover art made the music feel personal. This effort affected how we connected to songs. Psychologists note that people value things more when they work for them, a concept known as effort justification. Having to wait, trade, or save for music made it stick. I still remember hearing 17 Seconds for the first time while visiting a friend. We were listening to it in the dark as we passed around the album sleeve. Making a mixtape was a hands-on ritual. You'd plan the order, choose where to slow down or build up, and fit it all into 74 minutes. It wasn't just playlisting, it was storytelling. Today's algorithms may shuffle based on history, but they don't craft narratives or flow with meaning. The personal touch gets lost when a computer does the work. Sharing was more social. You might go to a friend's house to hear their new record or gather around MTV for a new video. These moments build real connections. Today, sending a song link is easy, but it's not the same as sharing headphones or talking through each track together. Limitations shaped how we listened. Not being able to hear any song anytime made albums feel special. You'd play records all the way through, even the less catchy tracks, and sometimes those became favorites. Discovery became part of your musical identity. When I started researching material for this video, part of me hoped the conclusion would be 80s music sounds better because 80s music was great, while today's music just sucks. Period. And I'm sure many still feel that way, even after watching this video. But if we want to be objective, the real answer is something else. For many who grew up in the 80s, those synth-driven tracks still feel like home because they are tied to defining moments. Neuroscience supports this. Music from adolescence builds deep links in the brain that shape what we respond to for decades. But this isn't just about one era. Today's teens are building their own musical maps with the songs of now. That cycle never stops. If you're an 80s kid, drop your favorite synth hook in the comments. If you're younger, share the track you think will define your generation. Thanks for watching.